The Romans knew that mercy was a gamble, and in the game of empire, gambling meant weakness. Carthage was not simply a rival. It was a symbol of defiance, a reminder that Rome could be challenged. For decades, the two powers clashed, bleeding one another across the Mediterranean. But Rome, in its ruthless genius, understood what Carthage represented: the possibility of resurrection. To leave Carthage standing was to invite danger into the future. And so, when the final hour arrived, Rome chose not compromise, not treaty, not mercy, but erasure. They leveled the city stone by stone, salted the earth so nothing would grow, and ensured that history would not remember Carthage as a survivor, but as a warning. Power demands finality. This, Machiavelli tells us, is wisdom dressed in cruelty. He knew that in politics, half measures breed danger. A weakened enemy is not a dead enemy, but a waiting one. A rival left alive may smile, may bow, may even sign treaties, but in the shadows they sharpen their knives. And history shows us again and again, the enemy you wound but do not kill will return. Rome did not make this mistake. They understood the psychology of nations as Machiavelli later understood the psychology of men. That resentment sleeps but never dies, that defeat without annihilation becomes the fuel of vengeance, and that mercy, when miscalculated, becomes the seed of ruin. So, let us consider this lesson. Think of the rulers who, in their vanity, sought to humiliate their rivals but not destroy them. They left their enemies alive, believing that fear was enough. But fear fades. Fear is temporary. Hatred is eternal. Machiavelli would say, "If you must strike, strike with such force that the rival cannot rise again." The Romans did not want a humbled Carthage. They wanted no Carthage at all. That is why Rome lasted. That is why its shadow still stretches across our imagination 2,000 years later. Rome teaches us that empires are not built on hesitation, but on decision. When you hesitate, you leave space for your enemy's breath. And that breath is enough to summon revenge. Carthage was once a jewel, a trading empire glittering with wealth, a city of sails and merchants. But wealth without absolute power is a provocation. Rome could not allow such a rival to continue, for in every coin minted in Carthage, in every ship built upon its harbors, there was the potential of future war. This is the cruel arithmetic of power. You either remove the rival entirely, or you condemn your heirs to endless conflict. Machiavelli did not glorify this act because it was beautiful. He glorified it because it was effective. He wrote that men, and by extension nations, never forget injuries. They may forgive small wounds, but great ones? Never. A nation that has tasted humiliation will pass down the memory to its children. Carthage would have remembered every scar Rome inflicted. The children of Carthage would have grown into men with fire in their eyes, and one day, the Mediterranean would have burned again. Rome, with cold logic, refused to plant those seeds. Consider how often rulers of our own age fall into this trap. They leave their rivals weakened but not destroyed. They exile them, strip them of titles, humiliate them in public trials. And yet, years later, the same rivals return, more dangerous, more determined, with the sympathy of the crowd. Weakness disguised as mercy becomes the greatest mistake a ruler can make. Rome understood that survival demands cruelty at the right moment. Not cruelty for its own sake, but cruelty with purpose. This is what Machiavelli meant when he declared that power demands finality. Half measures in politics are poison. If you leave a rival alive, you have not defeated him. You have merely postponed your own downfall. The destruction of Carthage is not just a story of antiquity. It is the eternal parable of survival, the eternal whisper of strategy across time. Rome did not look at Carthage and see neighbors. Rome looked at Carthage and saw the possibility of rebellion written into its very stones. A city that had once challenged Rome was a city that could challenge again. This is the core of Machiavelli's brutal wisdom. When you face a rival who has already tested your strength, you cannot expect them to remain humble forever. Pride is not erased with treaties. Pride is not softened by speeches. Pride is only crushed when the very source of pride is annihilated. Carthage was a proud city. Rome, therefore, had only one choice. Machiavelli understood something about human nature that many rulers forget. Men remember victories more than defeats. Defeats are bitter, but victories live in the heart like a hidden ember. For a city like Carthage, even the memory of past greatness would have been enough to inspire rebellion. Imagine generations of Carthaginians whispering, telling stories of Hannibal, of elephants crossing the Alps, of battles that made Rome tremble. Would such a people remain quiet? No, they would have risen again. The memory of greatness is the most dangerous fuel a defeated people can carry. Rome's act, then, was not only military but psychological. It destroyed not just the walls but the memory of Carthaginian pride. Mercy in politics is seductive. It makes the ruler appear noble, generous, even godlike. But Machiavelli asks a harder question. What is the cost of that mercy? If mercy plants the seed of your future destruction, then mercy is not kindness, it is negligence. Many rulers fall because they confuse compassion with strategy. A general pardons his enemy, believing that magnanimity will secure loyalty. Instead, the enemy waits, rebuilds, and strikes again. The Romans refused to be deceived by the illusions of mercy. They chose survival over sentiment, and history rewarded them. Rome's decision to destroy Carthage is the kind of act that modern sensibilities recoil from. It feels cruel, barbaric, even monstrous. But Machiavelli teaches us to look beyond emotion and into necessity. The question is not, was it kind? The question is, was it effective? Carthage never rose again, and Rome, freed of its greatest rival, dominated the Mediterranean for centuries. Cruelty once, if applied with precision, prevented cruelty 1,000 times over in the future. That Machiavelli insists is the paradox of power. The harshest act may create the longest peace. The destruction of Carthage was not just the fall of a city, it was the triumph of strategy over sentiment. Rome's senators understood that hesitation in such a moment would be fatal. Imagine, for a moment, if they had chosen a softer path. Suppose Carthage had been spared, reduced but alive, humiliated but breathing. Within a generation, perhaps two, Hannibal's descendants would have gathered their strength. Ships would have returned to the harbor. The Mediterranean would once again echo with the clash of steel, and Rome would have been forced to fight again for survival. But Rome refused to fight the same war twice. This is what Machiavelli admired: the willingness to be decisive when hesitation was most tempting. The truth is simple but brutal. When a rival has the power to harm you, the choice is not between kindness and cruelty. The choice is between survival and destruction. Leaders who fail to see this illusion of choice are swallowed by history. Machiavelli tells us that men are quick to forget kindness, but they never forget injuries. A rival who survives your mercy will remember not your generosity, but the humiliation of defeat. And humiliation in politics is more dangerous than hatred. Hatred can be managed, humiliation cannot. It festers in silence, grows in the dark, and one day explodes with a force greater than any army. Rome understood this, and Rome acted. And here lies the paradox. What appears to the weak as cruelty is to the strong a form of foresight. To destroy Carthage was not an act of madness, it was an act of reason. For Machiavelli, the ruler who cannot embrace necessity will not rule for long. History is littered with kings and princes who confused weakness for mercy, who confused delay for wisdom, who confused indecision for peace. They believed they were humane. In truth, they were negligent. They did not understand what the Romans knew instinctively, that power demands finality and survival requires ruthlessness. So, what is the lesson for us? That survival, whether of empires, nations, or even individuals, comes not from illusions of kindness, but from the clarity of necessity. When faced with danger, when confronted by an enemy who will never forget, never forgive, never rest, you must choose as Rome chose. Do not wound, do not weaken, destroy, for only in destruction is there safety. Only in finality is there peace. The story of Carthage is not confined to dusty chronicles. It is alive in every throne room, in every boardroom, in every place where power is contested. For what Rome did to Carthage, every ruler, every strategist, every competitor is tempted to do in their own sphere. The names change, the weapons change, the empires rise and fall, but the logic remains the same. Leave your rival standing, and you leave yourself vulnerable. Destroy your rival completely, and you secure your peace. This is why Machiavelli called the destruction of Carthage not cruelty, but wisdom. He knew that human beings are predictable. Their pride, their memory, their hunger for vengeance will always return. It is tempting for rulers to imagine that they can manage their enemies, that through alliances, treaties, marriages, or negotiations, they can bind ambition in chains. But ambition is not so easily shackled. Ambition waits. Ambition bides its time. Ambition survives humiliation better than it survives annihilation. A man can forgive insults. He cannot forgive a stolen destiny. This is what Rome crushed when it destroyed Carthage. Not just its army, not just its walls, but its destiny. No Carthaginian could dream of empire again because there was no Carthage left to dream. And here, Machiavelli's lesson pierces across time. Look at the kings who spared their rivals. Look at the princes who showed mercy to those who had once plotted against them. Almost always, the story ends the same way. The rival returns sharper, angrier, deadlier than before. Think of Caesar, stabbed by men he had pardoned. Think of emperors who banished enemies rather than killing them, only to face rebellion years later. Their mistake was not cruelty. Their mistake was weakness disguised as mercy. Rome, with Carthage, did not make that mistake. This is the Machiavellian truth. You do not owe your rival mercy, because your rival will never repay it. You owe yourself survival. To destroy Carthage was not simply to kill an enemy. It was to secure Rome's future. This is why Machiavelli admired the act, not for its savagery, but for its certainty. It was the decision of leaders who understood that in the game of power, hesitation is death, and cruelty at the right moment is the highest form of wisdom. History does not repeat in detail, but it repeats in pattern. The pattern is always the same. A ruler rises, a rival challenges, the rival is defeated, the ruler spares him, and years later the rival returns with vengeance burning in his heart. Mercy becomes the parent of rebellion. Weakness becomes the seed of downfall. This is why Machiavelli looked to Rome and said, "Here, at last, was a people who understood. They broke the cycle. They ended the game not with words, not with treaties, but with fire. The fire that consumed Carthage consumed also the possibility of its return." Consider the danger of half measures. To wound an enemy, but not kill him, is to make him dangerous beyond measure. He now has nothing to lose and everything to avenge. This is not only true of empires, it is true of men. Humiliate a rival and spare his life, and you have given him both motive and time. He will come for you. Machiavelli's wisdom is harsh but undeniable. When necessity commands, strike not to wound but to finish. Rome did not humiliate Carthage. Rome erased it. That is why Rome survived. Yet, how many rulers refused to learn this? How many chose mercy, hoping to buy loyalty with kindness? They soon discovered that loyalty bought with fear is stronger than loyalty bought with love. A prince who pardons too often becomes the prisoner of his own generosity. His enemies sense it, exploit it, and destroy him. Rome, by contrast, showed that sometimes the greatest act of mercy is no mercy at all, because to destroy one enemy completely is to save countless lives in the future. Cruelty in the moment becomes compassion across centuries. This is why Machiavelli admired the Romans. They did not confuse sentiment with survival. They did not hesitate when hesitation would have been fatal. They did not fear being called cruel because they knew that cruelty, when necessary, is not cruelty, it is clarity. Leaders today, blinded by the illusions of mercy, would do well to remember this. For power does not forgive weakness, and history does not forgive indecision. We like to imagine that we are different from the ancients. that our politics are more civilized, that our diplomacy is more refined, that humanity has advanced beyond the raw brutality of Rome. But this is a comforting illusion. Strip away the marble facades and the polite speeches, and the same truths remain. Nations still compete for dominance. Corporations still destroy one another. Leaders still understand that survival depends not on kindness, but on clarity. The Romans burned Carthage with fire. Today, rivals are destroyed with sanctions, with markets, with information. The tools change, but the psychology does not. Think of how often we see mercy used as an excuse for indecision. Leaders proclaim peace while secretly buying time. Rivals shake hands with smiles while sharpening daggers beneath the table. This is not progress, it is performance. Rome did not perform. Rome acted. That is why Machiavelli admired them. They chose finality when others would have chosen delay. They did not simply wound their rival, they ended the story. The lesson for every age is simple. Do not mistake theater for power, and do not mistake words for survival. Even in the personal sphere, this truth echoes. A rival at work, a competitor in business, an enemy in politics. If you allow them to remain, they will grow. If you humiliate them without finishing them, they will return. Human beings cannot let go of pride. Pride is stronger than memory, stronger than fear, stronger even than pain. Rome understood that pride must not be left alive in one's enemy. That is why Carthage was not merely defeated but obliterated. And that is why Rome endured, while so many others vanished into history. The modern world hides its Carthages beneath treaties and diplomacy, but the logic remains. Behind every smiling summit, behind every photo of unity, the question is always the same. Who will survive and who will be destroyed? And Machiavelli whispers across the centuries. Survival does not belong to the merciful. It belongs to the decisive. It belongs to those who, like Rome, understand that power demands finality. Machiavelli warns us, cruelty is not a tool to be used recklessly. It is not to be indulged in, nor savored like wine. It is to be applied with precision like a surgeon's knife at the exact moment when survival demands it. Rome did not burn every city. Rome did not crush every rival. But Carthage was too dangerous to spare. The wisdom was in the distinction. Weak rulers kill out of fear. Strong rulers destroy out of necessity. The difference is everything. And here lies the heart of the Machiavellian truth. It is not love that preserves power, it is fear. Men are fickle in their love, quick to betray, quick to forget. But fear holds. Fear lingers. Fear survives even when hope dies. Rome did not ask Carthage to love them. Rome ensured that Carthage feared them even in death. The salt sown into its fields was not strategy, it was theater. It was Rome teaching the world that resistance would not be tolerated. The destruction of one city became the preservation of an empire. This is what Machiavelli asks us to remember, that the harshest acts of power are not chosen because men enjoy cruelty, but because without them, chaos would devour order. Better one act of destruction than 1,000 acts of rebellion. Better one city gone than 100 wars born from its survival. Rome was not merciful, but Rome was wise. And in the end, wisdom, not mercy, is what secures dominion. What does it mean then to learn from Carthage? It means understanding that power is not maintained by half measures. That survival is not granted to the sentimental. That mercy without calculation is not virtue, but suicide. Rome did not rise because it was kind. Rome rose because it was clear. When the choice came between sparing and surviving, Rome chose survival, and the world obeyed. We live in a time when leaders fear being called cruel more than they fear being destroyed. They hesitate, they delay, they compromise, and in doing so, they invite their enemies to grow. A rival spared today becomes a monster tomorrow. A city left standing becomes a rebellion waiting to ignite. Machiavelli knew that the cost of hesitation is always higher than the cost of decisive cruelty. It is better to strike once and end the matter forever than to strike 100 times and never finish it. But the lesson of Carthage is not only for kings and generals. It is for every soul who seeks power, who struggles against rivals, who faces enemies disguised as friends. In life, as an empire, half measures are poison. If you choose to act, act completely. If you choose to confront, confront without leaving room for revenge. If you choose to rise, rise without apology. Rome did not apologize to Carthage. Rome did not explain. Rome acted and history bowed. And this is why Machiavelli's wisdom survives, though centuries have passed. Because human nature has not changed. Pride has not changed. Rivalry has not changed. The desire for power has not changed. And so, the lesson remains the same. Destroy your Carthage, whatever it may be, or be destroyed by it. Power demands finality. Mercy without strength is betrayal of oneself. Only those who understand this rule endure. The rest are consumed by the very enemies they failed to finish. The end of Carthage was not only the end of a city, it was the beginning of a truth carved into history. That power to survive must be absolute. Rome understood what so many after them would forget, that a rival spared is not a rival silenced. It is a rival waiting. A wound not cauterized festers. A fire not extinguished burns again. And a city not destroyed becomes the grave of those who once thought themselves merciful. Machiavelli, centuries later, drew from this with brutal clarity. He told princes and rulers what most are too afraid to hear. If you must destroy, destroy completely. If you must strike, strike in such a way that your enemy cannot recover. For men forgive many things, but they never forgive humiliation, and they never forget survival denied. Rome's wisdom was not cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was survival for eternity's sake. And so the question becomes, what is your Carthage? What enemy do you wound but never finish? What rival do you tolerate, hoping they will fade on their own? What weakness do you excuse, praying it will vanish in time? These are illusions. They are lies we tell ourselves to avoid the harshness of finality. Yet, history shows us, what you do not end will one day end you. Rome chose clarity and Rome endured. Carthage hesitated and Carthage was erased. This is the wisdom Machiavelli offers across centuries. Do not wound what you cannot kill. Do not spare what you cannot control. Do not show mercy where mercy will breed revenge. For power is not in gestures, not in performances, not in empty promises. Power is in finality. Power is in the courage to do what others cannot. Power is in the ruthless clarity to end what must be ended, so that you and all you build may endure. And so, remember the lesson of Carthage, remember the wisdom of Rome, and remember that in every age, in every battle, in every struggle for survival, power demands finality. This is not cruelty. This is not evil. This is the truth of survival, the price of dominion, the law that cannot be escaped. The Romans knew it. Machiavelli knew it. And now you know it too.